Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, presentation. I think that's something you can never know too much about or never practice enough. I think today's podcast is going to be fascinating as we drop into that world of presenting on stage.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this because I think you should be on stage, Kevin, mainly so that people can throw rotten eggs at you and stuff like that. That'd be really fun. That would
that's King Charles.
Yeah, oh, right. Yes, of course, you went to Yorkshire as well. Anyway, today we have Andrea Pacini, who is the UK presentation director for Ideas on Stage. Andrea, welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Kevin. Looking forward to this chat.
Now, we can see behind you that you've got a load of books. You haven't read any of them, but you've just put them there for effect.
That's right. Yeah.
Are they all about presentation?
What I do is I tend to read. I'm a huge book lover, and I tend to read 50% of the books I read are very much connected to public speaking presentations.
Yeah.
Maybe 40% is connected to business, entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah.
And then 10% is just general interest, whatever comes to mind.
Well, I mean that's really, it's nice to meet somebody who's really thoroughly interested in the art, but also the wider context as well. It sounds a bit like you might have started life in Italy. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what part of Italy? Is it the south, the real people, or is it the north, the posh guys?
I'm from the middle of the country.
Oh, that's all right. Good answer.
In a small town, in a small region that nobody knows. It's opposite Rome, but in the other coast.
Lovely. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. You must feel beaten down by those people in the north and the south warring with each other. But,
yeah, you're right. Everybody talks about the difference between the north and the south, and nobody cares about us in the middle. But
no, okay. I know. Well, we do today, and we're really delighted that you've joined us. But you're actually based over here in the UK, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been living in London for about 10 years now.
Okay, all right. So that's good. That's a good long time. That's in my eyes, Kevin. It's too long, to be honest with you. So, I mean, 10 years in London, blimey.
I love it. Like that. I love it.
You know, I still hold that the only good thing about London is the train heading north.
Mm. Well, I don't know. I kind of like going down there and enjoying it, and there's some lovely people there, and I meet some lovely people there. But truth is, it's not really for me. Having said that. You, on the other hand, you must come across an awful lot of people who get on stage. I'd be interested to find out, what is it that makes somebody who's quite good, really good, when they're on stage?
There are, in my experience, Graham, there are 5 things. There are 5 principles, if you want, for great presentations. A good presentation has to be simple, and then I'm going to give you just a top level overview of what I mean by that.
Yeah,
it has to be clear, it has to be relevant to the audience, and that perhaps is the most important thing. And why not? It also has to be original and enjoyable. Think about the word score. Like in football, you want to score when you give a presentation: simple, clear, original, relevant, or related to the audience, and enjoyable. Very top level. Simple, because the more you say, the less they remember. So you need to keep it short, simple, and to the point. Clear, because your key messages should be obvious to everybody, including you as the presenter. And in my experience, often that's not the case. Original, because you want your presentation to stand out, to be a bit different, so that they'll pay more attention and remember it for longer. Related, because when we give a presentation, it's their presentation, not ours. It's always the audience's presentation. So we need to make sure that what we say is useful and relevant to them. And then enjoyable. Well, of course, if your audience enjoys your talk, again, they'll pay more attention, they'll remember more, and maybe they'll do what you want them to do.
Wow. I mean, that's fairly easy to remember, Kevin. I know it's quite difficult in Newcastle, having that word score around. But in Leeds, we're fairly used to it.
Well, but we're quite used to it now. We're putting 4 or 5 away every game. So
Oh, here we go. But no, seriously though, it's a nice acronym to remember. And do you find that when you're talking to people, because one of your objectives is to get 1,000 entrepreneurs, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, to share their message, is the sort of culmination of that being on a stage, maybe a TED Talk, and 1,000 of those people, or are there other stages, other places to reach that goal for you?
Many other stages. Now, just so you know, in the last 12 years, we've been working with more than 500 TEDx speakers. And I'm saying this just because you mentioned TED Talks.
Yeah.
Although we specialize in working with business leaders, business professionals, entrepreneurs, business owners on business presentations. So even the name of a company, Ideas on Stage, stage could be an actual stage, like in a TED conference.
Yeah.
But it could also be, we are always on stage, even at the moment. Now it's online, it's an online stage. So in the end, in many cases, in business, in our lives, we need to pitch, present, and communicate our ideas. Anytime that's the case, then we are on stage. That's what we mean by that.
I've just had a colleague who works with me with a charity, and she's going to be doing some work along my side. And she was showing me this video that she did, and taking a video of our chief executive, and it was part of a degree course. But basically, she was saying, "Oh, I hate the sound of my voice." And I remember Kevin and I, when we started this podcast, we were a bit nervous about the sound of our voices, and now I don't think either of us cares.
No, we don't. We definitely don't care. I think time has moved on in terms of that self-consciousness. Very definitely, yes.
Is that something that, though, right at the beginning, that some people, when it comes to presenting, they're bothered about that?
Everybody does. And also, it's not just the voice, but also if you think about other delivery skills, if you want, things like body language, posture, gestures, hand gestures, eye contact. And if we think about voice in particular, now, if we are talking about an online context, then a crucial thing that we need to do is just very simple. I see, for example, I don't know about you, Graham, but I see for Kevin. Kevin, is there like a microphone in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah. So online, having an external microphone makes a huge difference. Voice is a very powerful communication tool. When it comes to online communication, Graham, you mentioned videos, perhaps is the most important tool we have.
Yeah. Now, I've certainly noticed that about microphone. And Graham was talking about not liking the sound of your own voice. I like the sound of my voice much better when it's been recorded through a decent microphone. Makes a huge difference. Huge difference. Yeah. And the good thing is that we don't have to invest thousands of pounds to have a decent microphone. We can, but even for £20, £100, then the quality of the voice is completely different.
Yeah, I've had a blue
Yeti.
what's it called? I don't know what it's called. Blue microphone, whatever. For I don't know how many years, 7 or something like that. And it works. It works well enough. Although I don't know from the other side. Maybe Kevin, you have problems with my audio, but I don't know. It just, you can hear me. I do tend to speak a reasonably loud way. So. But I don't know. That's all about projection, I guess. Kevin?
Yeah. My advice to any podcaster coming along and saying, well, I'm going to start a podcast. What equipment do I need? And the first thing I would say is, just get a decent microphone. It's really all you need.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry.
I agree, Kevin. I agree 100%.
Like that.
Yeah, I agree, Kevin. That's the most important thing. And then if we think about the setup in general, and not just with podcasts, but let's think about presentations, online presentations, then microphone, number one. Then also, ideally, if we want to have a good setup, we should think about an external webcam, not the one built in our laptop. Right. We should think about headphones as well. We should think about an external light. Either we have a good natural source of light in front of us, a window, or an external light, or both, and then background as well. Again, we don't have to invest a lot of money. It doesn't have to be perfect, but these are some things which are not important or relevant in an in-person context, but now they become very important when it comes to online communication.
Podcasts have liberated the number of people talking to the world, and we are pretty close to our 350th episode, and we're really grateful for the quality of guests that we've had, and you're another example, and from our point of view, attracting those people is really important to us because we can share their knowledge, and that's really the thing that gets Kevin and I, or keeps Kevin and I doing this, because we're always picking up ideas. You've mentioned SCORE already. If you had to share with us the one person of the one event, or the thing that you learned probably as much about presentation as almost anything else, where would you have been? What was it about, and who was speaking?
The first thing that comes to mind, Graham, is an actual example, not from my own experience, but from one of our clients, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I'll give you the example, then I'll tell you what the lesson was. So some time ago, we were working with a client. Her name is Marie from Paris. Marie is an executive. She's an expert in leadership. Okay. And she was invited by an association in Finland to give a talk about leadership. Mm-hmm. And she was super excited. It was one of her first international speaking opportunities. So she prepared really well. She knew her message. She told us that she prepared 50 beautiful slides, and also she practiced properly. So she was ready to go. She flew to Finland the day before the conference, then arrived there on the day, half an hour before the audience, because she wanted to make sure that she had time to set things up. And when she was about to connect her laptop to the screen, she realized that there was no screen. So a little bit of panic. She went and asked the organizers, assuming that they would say, "Oh, sorry, Marie, now we're going to fix this for you." But what they did instead was they started laughing. And so she says, "Why are you laughing?" And they say, "Look, Marie, you want to show 50 slides, but actually you've been invited to give a talk to the association in Finland of blind people." Blind people. Now,
right.
I know it's an extreme example. It sounds like a bad joke, but it happened for real. Now, the lesson for me when she told me the story is, and it's very much connected to one of the 5 principles, relevant. It's not our presentation, it's always the audience's presentation. The very first thing we need to do in preparation for any presentation, rather than what most people do, opening up PowerPoint and putting together some slides, we always need to start with the audience. Who is the audience? What are their needs? What's the context? And that's the only way to create a presentation which is relevant to them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And you do feel for her. Having said that, did she miss the memo? I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose blind would not mean blind in French, but wouldn't it? Don't they have Google? Google Translate.
You're right. She didn't even take the time to translate the name of the association from Finnish to French, and she would have realized that perhaps there was no need to have 50 beautiful slides.
And although as she was walking in there half an hour before, all those people with white sticks, something's going on here. But interesting, a really good example. I guess though, but as you said right at the beginning, she obviously quite a talented person because she's helping people, but presumably now she's a whole lot better at doing her job
because of what happened. We can learn from mistakes, definitely.
The one thing that I've often thought about is, how do those people get TEDx gigs? I mean, is there a TEDx site that they have to almost like sign up to? Because I with Kevin, I can understand him getting a request because he's, multi-talented and all that kind of stuff. And unlike me, he's still got hair, but,
Yeah, and talking about hair, yeah, that would
Oh, all
be.
right. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. But
So there are a couple of ways. One way is that you get invited.
Mm.
So if somebody is organizing either the actual TED event, so you've got TED and you've got TEDx, and these are independently organized TED style events. So it's very different. But you can be invited by them if somebody is running a local TEDx event in your region, and if they know you or if they find something interesting about you, then they can invite you. So that's one way. That's the best option. Or you can submit an application. Yes, so you can approach them.
Yeah.
You can tell them, look, I've got this idea, or I've been doing this piece of this project. And of course, it has to be relevant to that theme. Every TEDx event has a theme, and if you think it's relevant, you can pitch your idea, and you'll take it from there.
I don't know about you, Kevin, but I quite like the idea of being a TEDx speaker or a TED speaker or whatever. But at the end, because I think it's such a challenge for you as an individual, and I always enjoyed the training that I got years and years ago on presentations. I always found it quite challenging, but the idea of connecting your eyes to people or connecting to people in the audience, I found that relatively easy to do because I think I'm that type of person. But if you've got a big audience where you might not even be able to see them because of the lighting, how would you go about? Do you just move your head around so it looks like you're looking at?
I've got to say that Graham would be my concern as well, and I find this presenting things online. Now, I kind of learned how to present in client meetings, in team meetings, and you had a group of people round the table. Yeah. You'd be talking to them directly. You'd be spotting who's engaged, who's not engaged. You'd be looking at individuals and so on. And you'd be taking the temperature of the room all the time. You can't do that online, and you can't really do that from a stage. So very, very interested in your response to this one, Andrea.
Yeah. So a couple of things there. So the principle is eye contact. You're right. We want to make a good eye contact with the audience. So the principle is the same, but you're right. The way we apply it is different depending on the context. Now, in a face-to-face presentation, Graham, it doesn't matter how many people you have in front of you. There's always one way to go about it. And we need to understand that good eye contact is always a person-to-person interaction, which means that if you've got 10 people in front of you, person-to-person means that rather than moving your head like a lighthouse, that's what people do. Like we let our eyes fly around the room way too quickly, whether we are aware of it or not. That's because if we're not trained, we are afraid of making eye contact with somebody. So we need to train ourselves to make a person-to-person interaction. And the technique here, and it's easier said than done, but the technique is one sentence, one person. Then when you change sentence, you change the person you're looking at. And then another sentence, another person. And of course, you don't want to be robotic. You go this person, this person, this person, that person, and then you start again. You want to do it randomly. But person-to-person interaction. Now, you're right. If it's a very big audience, theater, lights down, you can't see them, then again, it takes practice. And the more you do it, confidence comes from familiarity in the end. So once you know the technique, you're right, Graham, you just, even if you can't see them, you pretend that you see them. So it's always person-to-person interaction, even if you can't see them. But yes, I appreciate that it's more challenging.
And of course, as you know, when comedians have big... when it's funny you mentioned comedians and the phone goes, but when comedians have that going on, then basically they kind of pick on somebody right at the front, don't they? You know, and I always find that incredible because but all those people at the back, they're loving it. They're probably thinking, "Thank God I'm not at the front." But they're picking on somebody, you know, and it's often extraordinarily funny because, you know, you've got that one-to-one communication. But I'm not sure that's necessarily going to work with a TEDx talk.
Well, what happens is, and this is very much connected, Graham, to what you said, the other nice thing about making a person-to-person interaction is that even if you have a big audience, including in a TEDx context, you look at one person, then the 10 people, pretty much the 10 people around that person will think that you're looking at them.
Right.
So that's why you don't have to look at an area of the room. Some people tell you, look at this area. No, just always make an actual eye contact with an actual person. And if you do that, then the 10 people around that person will think you're looking at them. Now, from that, Kevin, you're right. Online, it's completely different. The mistake I see all the time is that we either look at the screen. For example, now I'm looking at the screen. Kevin, now I'm looking at you. Now, and for listeners who can't see us at the moment, but I'm looking at Graham now on the screen. And when we do that, say that we are giving a presentation, lots of people maybe look at their slides, but when we do that, we fail to make a good connection with the audience. So what do we need to do online? Again, we need to train ourselves. Even if it's uncomfortable, we need to look at the camera. That's where the audience is. Right. Of course, there are different contexts. Right. For example, now we're having a chat. When you ask a question, I want to look at you. I'm looking at the screen. But when I respond, for example, I try to look at the camera. And the principle, the technique I use, for example, is 80-20. So 80% of the time, try to look at the camera. 20% of the time, Kevin, you look at the screen, because you're right. You still want to try and read the room. And you can do that with this 80-20 principle.
I like that. Because it is difficult, because my camera's on the iMac here, and it's at the top of the iMac. I'm pointing at it now, and if I was to look up there, I find I can't see how Kevin's looking, or whether Kevin's whatever, and I can't see. I know you're looking at me because your screen's a little bit further down, but your camera's a little bit further up. And so when you're talking right into the camera. It's quite a challenging thing to do that, especially 80% of the time looking at that camera. But it makes so much sense.
Yeah. And also, so a couple of things there, Graham. One is that, yes, it's challenging. It's also uncomfortable. But in communication, there is a paradox. We call it the comfort paradox, which means that often what's comfortable for us as the speaker is not comfortable for the audience, and vice versa.
Right.
What's not comfortable for us, like, for example, looking at the camera 80% of the time, is comfortable for the audience. So we need, again, it's their presentation, it's their communication. We do it for them. And then you made me think about, yes, because you talked about the position of the camera. Now, ideally, for a good setup, and I'm not talking about today's context, which is a podcast, but if you give an online presentation, ideally you want to have the best angle for the camera to capture your face is at the same level as your eyes. So you don't want to have the camera looking down to you. And even worse than that, you never want to have you never want to look down to the camera, because that feels aggressive from a communication perspective. So if you've got your camera, if you find a way to have a setup that allows you to have a camera that captures your face at the same level as your eyes, and also one other practical tip, ideally, your eyes 2/3 up the screen. So not in the middle of the screen, but 2/3 up the screen. That allows you to make a very good eye contact online.
Yeah, the power of thirds. We're all photographers nowadays, aren't we? But I get that. Great advice. You've talked about the sort of 5 things that people should be thinking about. When people turn up at ideas on stage, what's the typical problem they're facing? Why did they get to you?
The number one problem is that they need to communicate a message, an idea. That could be a product, a service, a project, just an idea. And their message is too complex. Sometimes it's even confusing. And the reason why that happens is because often it's not because we don't know what we are talking about. It's precisely because we know so much about what we are talking about. We know so much about a subject. We are so close to it that we think, first of all, that everything is important. And so we think that we need to communicate everything. And also, often we think that what we are communicating is simple and clear and engaging, but often the experience from the audience's perspective is the opposite. It's confusing. And as I think his name is Donald Miller, the author of Building a Story Brand, great book. He says that in communication, it's very simple. If you confuse, you lose, which means that you lose your audience, you lose their attention. And to me, by the way, this is called the curse of knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is the number one problem in communication. We know so much about a subject that we find it difficult to put ourselves in the audience's shoes, to communicate in a way that makes sense for them.
So, okay, and I completely agree with that, because that goes for lots of other things as well, even if you're writing copy or, putting stuff onto your web page. And a number of clients I have who I keep, unfortunately, I have to say things like, well, you're writing for them, not for you.
I'm thinking back to my career in consulting, and that's why you never took the IT folk on a sales presentation.
Yeah, but oddly enough, sometimes though, Kevin, don't you think that sometimes, even though they're often really good salespeople, because they basically can talk very quite logically, but you are right, they can get into the detail. But I don't know. Is there something about knowing how to create your presentation so it does naturally flow and is meeting the requirements? Do you just have to know? Because if you've got an audience of people, the TEDx audience, I mean, they don't necessarily share the same requirements, do they?
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes our job is harder because we have a mixed audience with different expectations, different levels of knowledge about a subject, different levels of understanding. And if that's the case, well, first of all, we need to accept the fact that often we can't please everybody. So if we try, the mistake that we can make is if we try to create a presentation that works for everybody, then it will work for nobody. What you can try and do is, and here is a key question we should ask ourselves in that context: what are the key messages that will be relevant to the majority of the people in the audience? And the key word is majority. What are the key messages that will be relevant to the majority of the people in the audience? And then we can focus on that. The other thing is that we should always try to simplify a message, even a language, even the words we use. Every time we want to communicate something, then again, we should ask ourselves, how would I explain this concept to a 15-year-old? How would I explain this concept to my grandmother? If they can understand it, then the majority of the people in the audience will be able to understand it too. And another practical tip for our listeners is, if you have a mixed audience, another thing you can do is you can create a modular presentation. So you've got different modules, different sections. So say, for example, that you give a sales, Kevin, you were talking about salespeople. So you give a sales presentation, you need to sell a product, and you've got the head of purchasing. In the audience, you have the finance director, you have the director of supply chain.
Yeah.
Then you can split your presentations into three modules, three sections. One which is more relevant to the head of purchasing, one for the supply chain director, and one for the finance director. And you can tell them at the beginning. So that's another way, Graham, that allows us to create something that works for as many people as possible.
Okay. Do you help people who want to sell from the stage? So in other words, I've been in audiences, and quite recently, where people have said, well, we've got this thing, and if you want it, get to the back of the room right now and sign up. And people literally get out of their chairs and head to the back of the room to spend their hard-earned money. Is that something that you help people with?
Okay, so we work with a lot of people, business owners, entrepreneurs, who want to, ultimately, they want the audience to take some kind of a next step. And sometimes, yes, they want to sell their products, their services. However, the scenario you've just described, if I understood it correctly, because I also attended similar conferences, I'm not a big fan of salesy presentation, salesy content. So it is definitely possible to give a sales presentation where your objective is for the audience to either buy something, or it doesn't have to be directly on the spot buying, could be for the audience, and I would prefer that, to express their interest, for example, in some kind of a next step. That could be maybe they express an interest in a follow-up conversation with you or with your team. So we help with that. If it comes to a very salesy and aggressive approach, I prefer to stay away from it.
Okay, well, it's horses for courses, but basically in this particular case, the people who were there, I would be known as a herd, as in they're all very much keen to be there, and the sales opportunity was relevant to them all. So in other words, the ones who wanted to take action because the offer was particularly attractive, and it was, they got out of their seats and went and bought it, because frankly there wasn't that many options to buy, but they're the ones who put the money down. So but the people in the audience were completely relevant for the message, and I think under those circumstances it would seem quite reasonable. Actually, it's probably, I mean, it might be salesy, yeah, but basically these guys expect to be sold too.
Yeah. So if it's relevant, and if what you're selling is a good idea, product, service for them, it's relevant, they need it, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah, we work with thousands of clients in that context. And
your clients then turn up at your door and they have a specific issue that they have to, I mean, presumably all of them are different issues. Maybe they have an executive who's going to be on a stage somewhere and going to be presenting the idea, but they haven't got the first clue about how to present. So you've probably got basket case on one side, and you might be refining somebody who's really quite good and practiced on the other.
Yeah, and you're right. And we personally, I find it much easier to work with somebody who want to go from good to great. And this is a general principle. It's not just with public speaking. Than working with somebody who has no clue about what to present, to take that person from their level to an acceptable level it's not that it's not possible, but it's much harder than working.
It's a real shocker. Andrea accepts the fact that he doesn't want these Billy Basic people to turn up to ideas on stage. Shocker. I don't.
Working with people who want to go from good to great is fantastic. And there are two key scenarios. Either you may have an important presentation coming up, so that can be one scenario. You don't have to, though. A lot of our clients simply want to improve their general presentation skills because they know that presenting anyway is an important part of what they do.
It's part of what you do, training people for TV as well. TV interviews, for instance.
We do media training as well. It's part of our offering, although we specialize in the presentation side, public speaking side of things. But yeah, media training is part of it.
Okay. I just want, because sometimes people are really quite clipped about short sentences and they don't go on too much.
And then we stop with that.
Yeah, that's it.
The stunning silence as Graham actually said a short sentence for me.
Yeah, I know. You were waiting for all the rest of it, weren't you? But I thought, I'm going to shut up then. But okay, all right. So you're. I'm just so if anybody's really interested in this, which I'm sure many people will be, you can find Andrea and his company at Ideas on Stage, ideas plural on stage.com, and that's where your site is. You're all over the world, are you, or is it just in Europe?
We are mainly in Europe. So we are a small company, a small team, but spread across different countries in Europe. So we are in the UK, of course, but also in France, in Paris. We have an office in Barcelona, in Spain, and in Milan, in Italy.
Okay. Well, you were too Italian for the Milan office then, presumably.
We have a colleague of mine who's also Italian, takes care of the Italian operations.
Yeah, he's from the north, isn't he? So he didn't want you.
He's from Milan. Yeah, he's from Milan.
Yeah, I think we've established that. But no, I mean, first of all, you're very welcome to stay in London, and welcome to it. Talk about football, though. I know that we weren't talking about football, but Italy are not going to the World Cup this time. Must be horrible for you.
Shall we change topic? No. Yeah, it is horrible also because as you may remember, it's the second time in a row, which never happened. So I'm a big football fan. I've always grown up taking it for granted that Italy is always in the World Cup. And that's the second time in a row.
Bizarrely, though, you go and win the Euros in between not qualifying for 2 World Cups.
Which is very strange. Very, very strange. I know. I don't know what's going on.
I think we gifted it to them, though, Kevin. I think that's but that's another.
I do remember two consecutive World Cups that England didn't qualify.
No, I know that's true. But just whilst we're on that subject, because people will want to categorise you in some way, what's your Italian team? And sadly, what's your English team?
My Italian team is Juventus, and I don't have an English team. Sorry.
You're playing the same colours as Kevin's team.
Yeah. What colours do Juventus play in? You see?
Oh, we know. But
you always support the team playing in black and white stripes, Graham.
Well, yeah, that is one option for you. But seriously though, it's nice that you're human as well. You have those human desires to be interested in football. What's the most kind of out there subject that you've had to spontaneously present on?
What does that mean when you say?
Well, I mean, maybe somebody said, right, okay, you've got 5 minutes. I want you to talk about raising frogs for 5 minutes. Is that something that you would be able to do, or would that be something that you would do as part and parcel of a bit of a fun exercise?
Not really. So and if we connect these to the conversation we've been having today,
yeah.
Being good at presenting has unless you are a stand-up, even stand-up comedians, they are very rehearsed and prepared. So being good at presenting has very little to do or nothing to do with being able to improvise. There are people who are very good at improvising, but for most people, especially for business professionals, business leaders, you can be a great presenter even if you don't know anything about how to improvise. There is a structured way of thinking about presenting, which involves a lot of preparation. And this applies to me, and it applies to the majority of the people that we work with.
On your site, you've got something saying, discover your presentation score and increase your ability to influence. What's behind that? Presumably you're asking a number of questions.
Yeah. That's a scorecard that we have. It's a free tool. It's called the Confident Presenter Scorecard, either on our website or if you Google Confident Presenter Scorecard, you can answer a few questions. It takes less than 3 minutes. It's for free, yes and no questions. And that will give you a score from 0 to 100%. It will tell you what that score means for you. And it also identifies opportunities for improvement. So that's the idea behind it. Of course, it's an indication, but it does tell you and us where you are on your presentation journey.
I see. In your experience, are men better presenters, or would you say it's women?
I don't know. I don't think that either of them is better than the other category.
No. Okay.
That's an area we don't want to go into, Graham. I think.
Well, I just wondering whether they had
brilliant of each and poor of each.
Yeah, probably. But no.
All
right.
The only thing I can say is that there are some specific challenges that women face when it comes to presenting, sharing their ideas. And that's not because they are worse than men, but because they have to face challenges that we don't have to face. And so I would just limit it there. So that's what I can say.
Okay, that's fair enough. The one thing about your website is you've got a lot of resources there, and you've written quite a number of your resources. What brought you into this field initially? I mean, how come you ended up at this presentational company?
Because when I was a little kid growing up in Italy, I grew up in a family of very small business owners. My parents have always been running their own very small business together. Right. They still do. And so as a kid, I saw the challenges because raising 4 kids while trying to run a business is not easy. I have a 2-month-old child at the moment, so now I can say it. But I also saw in them the spark, the entrepreneurial mindset, the proactive approach to life. And so that's why I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, to run my own thing. Now, in reality, that remained a dream for a long time, because before doing what I'm doing now, I tried many things, started many projects, all of them failed. But it was useful because in that process, what I realized was that there are so many great ideas that fail, not because of the ideas themselves, but just because of the way they are presented. And that's why I became a presentation coach. That's why my mission is to prevent great ideas from failing simply because of the way they are communicated.
That's a noble aim. One of the things you wrote about on your site was the ways in which you can start a presentation, and in this particular article you talk about 7 examples of good openings. Number 1 was what next. So what's that about?
This one is we call it what next, is the easiest way to try and grab the audience's attention, because that's what we want to do. At the very beginning, most people start by introducing themselves. Now, we need to accept the fact that nobody cares about us. The audience cares about them and what you can do for them. So we need to use the opening to grab the attention. And one way to do that is to simply tell them what's coming next. So that's why we call it what next. And you could do something, you could say something as simple as, in this presentation, I'm going to cover 3 key points. We're going to look at, and then you just briefly mention what the 3 things will be. So by the end of this presentation, what's your promise? What will they get out of it? In my case, by the end of this presentation, you'll have a very good understanding of how you can become a more confident presenter. That's it. Tell them what's coming next.
Another one of those 7, and we won't go through all 7, but basically you can find more about this on the ideasonstage.com website. But the number 4 on that list is a surprising fact or a shocking statistic. Now, do you like this one?
Is it a question to me or Kevin?
Yeah, no, I think you. I mean, I think Kevin loves it. He leads often with a shocking statistic.
Yeah, it can definitely be a great way to grab the audience's attention. And I think, I don't remember, Graham, maybe in that article there's an example from one of our clients where he says, so we were creating a presentation with a client, and the subject of that presentation was workplace safety. And they decided to start by saying, did you know that, I think it was in 2018 and 2019. You have it in front of you?
Yeah, it says, in the UK alone, we lost more than 38 million work days due to work-related accidents.
Yeah, so you start with just a shocking statistic like that. Now, of course, we need to make sure that whatever we use to open a presentation, whether that's a shocking statistic or an analogy, a metaphor, a story, whatever we use has to be connected to the key point we want to get across. Otherwise, it's never the statistic or the story or the analogy just for the sake of using that particular technique. It has to make a point.
Now, I think that one about the one shocking number is a great one for anybody in my discipline of finance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your tendency is to go in there to your presentation with the business results for the month, drown people in a whole load of boring numbers that they don't really understand. But if you can limit it to 1 or 2 or 3 numbers, then it's much easier for the audience to relate. And we're actually running at the moment a series of boot camps for finance business partners. And some of the things you've been talking about are part of what's in there. And we've got some great examples built into the course of taking examples from some of Apple's big keynote presentations. And you can look back, you'll find them online all over the place. It'll be Steve Jobs or his successor standing in front of a screen. There'll be one great big number up there, like standing in front of something that says 2 billion iPhones. And big statistic. He's got one PowerPoint slide, not 50 PowerPoint slides. It says one number, and he's got that shocking thing on it. But something I wanted to ask you there, Andrew. We went to the previous example, and you started off by saying, "Well, what's next? We're gonna do three things." Is that three things model something you'd recommend to people to follow? Because I've been taught that one quite a lot. Would you tend to push people down that route of to tell people three things?
Yes, 100%. Three is the most persuasive number in communication. There are studies, many studies that show that if we look at how our brain works, first of all, the human mind likes groups of three. And also in short-term memory, all of us, we find it very hard to remember more than roughly three things. So I don't care, please trust me, nobody does, whether talking to our listeners today, whether you have 7 reasons or 12 reasons or 1,000 reasons why they should listen to you, believe in your ideas, buy your products or services, just give them 3. That's what people can remember. So you want to be able to create and develop a clear storyline when presenting. A clear storyline could be as simple as a quick and interesting opening that grabs your audience's attention, going back to your point, Graham. Then we communicate our 3 key messages. Of course, depending on how much time we have, we can and we should support each of our 3 key messages with some supporting points. That's where you want to include, in addition to the facts and the figures, also maybe some stories, examples, analogies, so that you touch both the logical part of people's brain and the emotional part of people's brain. So opening, 3 key messages, and then a powerful conclusion, making it very clear to your audience what was your point and why they should care about it. If we are not doing this today, if we're not paying attention to the way we structure our presentations, we are making it harder for the audience to follow us, remember what we say, and do anything and take action. And that's why this is so important. By the way, Kevin, this is called the rule of 3. It's not something that I came up with. It's one of the simplest and most powerful principles in communication. Yeah. People can Google it. The rule of 3.
And actually, when you start looking deliberately for that rule of 3, it's amazing the number of places you find it. Now, most slogans, they boil down to 3 words. Yeah?
So true.
There's also Donald Trump.
So true. Great. There's also another. Oh, sorry, Kevin. Yeah, because sometimes with the audio, I didn't want to cut you off. But there's also another article that I've written recently where I talk about the rule of 3, the power of 3 in communication. And in the article that people can find on the website, I give lots of examples, exactly what you said, from politicians, slogans in general. If we think about here in the UK, when we still do, but when the pandemic started, we had slogans like, face, space. Do you remember? It was 3 things.
That's right.
Face, space, or hands, face, space. There are. You're right. When we start paying attention to this, we find the rule of 3 everywhere. In the British transport police, or in the transport, one of the slogans on the metro trains, they say "sit, say it, sorted."
Yeah.
So it's not.
That's all over UK transport as well.
Yeah. It's not sit, say it, sorted, and then you need to do something else. No, it's 3 things.
3 things.
It's memorable.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is said on the website is that, and to support the 3 things, the one thing that I would be heading for the exit, certainly before you got to point 2, is if you were just filling it full of corporate BS. If instead of talking about the features and benefits of your service, that instead you told a story to support each point, it would be far more relevant, wouldn't it?
Storytelling is one of the most powerful things we can do to make our presentations more, remember, score, original, and enjoyable. That's how you make them. There are many other techniques, but storytelling, you make them original and enjoyable. And when we say storytelling, Kevin, you were talking about in your industry, you mentioned finance, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you think about an industry like finance, when I say tell stories, I'm not saying that we need to tell an emotional story or a once upon a time type of story. No, but if we think about it, even in finance, in many other industries, there's always a story to tell. A story could be something that happened to you, something that happened to something else, to somebody else, a colleague of yours, a friend of yours. It could be a story of brand success. If another company, maybe one of your clients or another company in general, has already implemented an idea or a strategy that you are suggesting in your presentation, that's a story. The problem, Graham, with most business presentations is that they are 99% facts.
Yeah.
And then if we are lucky, just if we are lucky, 1% is story. We should turn this around.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to tell more stories. And that's one of the best ways, if not the best way, to make our presentations more engaging.
I know that we could spend another 3 or 4 hours and we wouldn't have even scratched the surface. But if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, the best way is through the website, I guess, Andrea.
Yeah, website, on social media, my main channel is LinkedIn. They can find me there. And then again, if people want to give it a try with the scorecard, the Confident Presenter scorecard, that's another way. Yeah,
Kevin's already aced that one. He's 100%. I think you're going to go to him and get some advice, really, I think. But no, seriously, you've been an absolutely brilliant guest today on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
So, Graham, loads and loads of great stuff from Andrea there.
Yeah.
Memorability of a number, the rule of 3, the ability to prepare, engaging with the audience with your eyes, loads and loads of great lessons.
And probably a load more that we never even touched on, because I think we could have gone on for hours. And I think Andrea is obviously very, very practiced in all of this. That's probably one of the secrets. But even if you just want to pick up a few pointers, hit up the website and have a look at the resources page. You'll find a load of different ideas, etc., that can potentially help you. But the truth is, these guys are experts, and so if you want help getting you from, in this case that you said earlier, from good to great, then you know where to go to get help.
Go spend some time looking around. I said during the podcast, once I'd been made aware of the rule of 3, once you start looking for it, you see all the places it turns up. Look at all the slogans that are either 3 words or 3 phrases.
Yeah.
Also, go look for those single big numbers and think back to the leaving the European Union campaign. Probably the thing that you remember most from the Leave campaign was a big number on a red bus. Whether the number was right or wrong is something loads of people will argue about. But hey, that big number was memorable and caused conversation.
I think absolutely. There is so much about presentation, and it's going to be received by an audience in a particular way. I don't often watch it anymore, but the BBC's Question Time, it seems to me that the audience is all of one persuasion anyway. So it seems to be it seems to be a very argumentative thing if you're of an alternative point of view. But emotion is raw when it comes to things like that, and because you're getting right to the center of somebody's personal experience, and I think that's really where Andrea is going.
Something that I learned in PwC years ago, and again it flips back to this rule of 3. Think of your audience. What do you want them to know? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? Know, feel, do. And if you use that within a presentation as well, it'll keep you spot on target.
I've got a feeling that we could go on for hours with you coming up with three sets of, with three phrases or three words. But today, instead, I've just been Graham Arrowsmith.
And I've just been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.